Good day, everyone. Today we will discuss the difference between the Intel Pentium G3260 at 3296.87 MHz and the AMD A9-9420 at 3592.72 MHz. So before we dive in and discuss the comparison and difference between both processors, we'll have a little description about them. So the AMD A9-9420 is an entry-level chip from the Stony Ridge APU series for notebooks. It was announced in the mid-2016. At its launch, the A9-9420 is the fastest Stony Ridge processor. It integrates two CPU cores clocked between 3 to 3.6 GHz. It also includes a Radeon R5 GPU with 192 shaders at 800 MHz as well as a single-channel DDR4 2133 memory controller. While the Intel Pentium is a fifth generation Pentium product line while it is built using Broadwell architecture. This processor features a base frequency of 3.3 GHz and as well as with Broadwell technology, it comes with features such as Intel virtualization technology. So this is the CPU benchmark where we will discuss the contrast and comparison between those two processors. So first, a benchmark is the act of running a computer program, a set of programs or other operations, in order to assess the relative performance of an object. Normally, by running a number of standard tests and trials against it. So here is the CPUZ benchmark, which we have assigned to research. So this is the Intel Pentium CPUZ benchmark. It has a version of 2017, a rating of 350 in its single thread and 542 in its multi-thread. While in the AMD, it has the version of 2017, 205 rating in its single thread and 349 in its multi-thread. As you can see, the Intel has a higher rating in both single-thread and multi-threaded. And here is the rating against its other processors. So the Intel Pentium is third and the AMD is second in its other processors. So here is the screenshot of the CPUZ software program that we have captured. As you can see, it has the features of the name, the code name, the package, technology, specification, family, the clock speed, multiplier, the bus speed, and other more. Next is the processor. The processor is a digital circuit which performs operation on some external data source, usually memory or some other data stream. It typically takes form of a microprocessor. So here is the processor of the Intel, the specifications, and the AMD. So threading of the Intel is about one CPU, two cores, and two threads. The frequency was mentioned in the start of the presentation, 3296.87 MHz. The multiplier, 33 current, and in 8 minutes, with a max of also 33 current. So the others are like its TDP with 53 watts and 1.063 volts. While in the AMD, the frequency is 3592.72 MHz. Its threading is one CPU, two cores, and 2 threads with a multiplier of current of 36. So next, we will proceed to the motherboard. The motherboard serves as a single platform to connect all the parts of the computer together. It connects the CPU, memory, hard drives, optical drives, video card, sound card, and other ports and expansion cords directly or via cables. So the motherboard of the Intel has a model of ASUS H81MD. The socket 1150 LGA, while the AMD has the model of HP 8325 and the socket of FT4. So when it comes to memory, it is the memory RAM of the processor. It's the super fast and so temporary data storage space that a computer needs to access right now or in the next few moments. It has a 4096 MB of RAM or 4 gig RAM. Both has 4 gig RAM. It has the AMD has a single channel 64 bits of RAM while the Pentium has single channel 64 bits of RAM. The frequency is 666.1 MHz with a ratio of 1:5, while the AMD has a frequency of 931.4 MHz with a ratio of 3:28. So next is the graphic card. The graphic card is a piece of computer hardware that produces the image you see on the monitor. It is responsible for rendering an image to your monitor. It does this by converting data into a signal your monitor can understand. So the GPU type of the Intel Pentium is HD graphics at 600 MHz and the GPU brand is the Asus Tech Computer Incorporated. While the AMD the GPU type is AMD Radeon R5 and has a 200 MHz, and the GPU brand is Hewlett-Packard. The GPU VRAM is 80 MB at 667 MHz. This is the other specifications in the CPUZ program. The model name, the model capacity, the model type. Intel Pentium, its screen and screen specifications, and other miscellaneous processors. So the Windows version, Windows 7 Ultimate Edition, and the CPUZ version. So here in the AMD, the model name, the model capacity, model type, Windows version, and the CPUZ version. So here let us proceed to the Geekbench comparison. This is the other type of the benchmarking program that we have searched online. So the benchmarking scores of the Intel Pentium. It has a single core of 675 score, a multi-core of 1222, while the AMD has a single core score of 255 and a multi-core score of 384. So as you can see, the Intel Pentium has a higher both single core and multi-core from the AMD A9. The processor is Intel Pentium the G3260, which was mentioned earlier. The frequency was rounded up, so 3300 megahertz. The cores two threads and the TDP of 53 watts. And the GPU of Intel HD graphics for 4th generation Intel processors. While the AMD, the processor of AMD A9-9420 with a frequency of 3000 MHz, the maximum which is 3600 MHz, with 2 cores, 2 threads, and 15 watts of the TDP, while the GPU of Radeon R5 series. Next will be the pass-mark comparison. So this is the comparison between the Intel Pentium and the AMD A9. The socket type, the CPU class, the clock speed, which is 3.3 gigahertz between the Intel Pentium and the AMD has 3 gigahertz. So the Intel Pentium has a higher clock speed. The turbo speed is not supported here in the pass mark, and while the AMD is up to 3.4 gigahertz. So the number of physical cores, 2 threads, and AMD has also 2. The max TDP, which is 53 watts and 15 watts. So the yearly running cost, first scene, number of samples, the cross-platform rating, which has 5,640 and 2,935 in the AMD. As you can see, the Intel Pentium has a higher cross-platform rating and a single thread rating of 1,877 for the Intel Pentium and 1,302 for the AMD, and the CPU mark of 2051 for the Intel Pentium and 1511 for the AMD. So the last thing we will discuss is the summary of the Intel Pentium and the AMD A9. So we will discuss the multi-thread, the single thread, and the TDP. So I averaged the rating between the three benchmarking sites, which is the Passmark, the Geekbench, and the CPUZ. So the average rating of the Intel Pentium is 882, while the AMD A9 has 367 rating of multi-thread. So it is clear that the Intel Pentium has a higher multi-threaded compared to the AMD. While the single-threaded, the Intel Pentium has a rating of 967 and the AMD has a rating of 587. The Intel Pentium still has a higher rating than the AMD A9. So the TDP watts is the wattage of the processor. So a lower TDP is better. However, most high performance CPU have higher TDP. So as you can see, the Intel Pentium has 53 watts while the AMD has 15 watts. So it is clear that the AMD has a higher performance, which causes its TDP higher than the AMD. So thank you everyone for watching.